Hello, and welcome to Virginia Wines Through the Years. I'm Charles Thomas. Today we have with us 5 of the 6 original Fredericksburg Wine Festival owners, and they represent Mattaponi, Hartwood, Ingleside, Lake Anna, Burnley, and Rogers Ford. Today we're going to talk from going from the vineyard through the bottle. Right now we have with us Mr. Lee Reeder from Burnley Winery. Lee, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Lee, you're going to talk to us about fermenting process, the tank to the bottle, and the difference between red and white.
All of our grapes are hand-picked, and the difference between red and white grapes are picked, brought to the winery, we destem them, it goes into a press, and then we pump the juice into a tank, and that's where we start fermentation. So with red wines, we would pick them, destem them, and put the skins, pulp, juice into a tank and ferment them on the skins, because that's where all the color of the wine will come from, is the color, is the skins. So as we ferment and we produce alcohol, the alcohol takes the color from the skins into the wine and turns it into a red wine.
So without the skins, we're drinking all white wine.
If you were to, on some grapes, if you were just to destem them and press them, you might get a little bit of color. On some grape varieties, you get none. Like Champagne's, which is a white sparkling wine, is normally 20 or 30% red grapes.
Really? So
Yeah.
it's a mixture.
It's a mixture.
So when I go to my local winery and I said I want a red blend or I want something that's pink, and obviously I'm not a a connoisseur of wines or expert, but just as the average person going to try something new, I'm looking for something with some color in it. So that's a mix.
Well, that'd be normally just a red wine, where a blend of either reds and whites of grapes or juices would be like a rosé or a blush.
Okay. So one of the things that my wife and we always talk about is the pairing. What goes with what? And I have no idea how that works.
Well, it is a subjective thing because everybody has different tastes. But generally, you would start off with like white wines with light meats like fish, chicken, red wines with darker meats. And then as you gain experience and confidence, then you sort of go with like the spice level. The spicier the wine, you want a heavier wine to compete. So you're sort of matching flavors. Okay. And that's when you get to like your intermediate to expert level of wine pairing.
I'll wait for the book to come out that you're going to write to help us out with that.
But you see, it's all subjective. So what I might like as a pairing, you might not like.
So, we try to read, Google things, and they'll say with chicken, you
generally go with white wine.
Go with a white wine, and with beef, you go with it. Is that because it's a heavier?
Because beef is a heavier dish, but if you're doing chicken with like Jamaican spices, that adds a lot of character and flavor components that you could serve that with a light red.
So is that because of the way it works with the spices and the meat on your tongue to
you want to balance
bring out that?
You want to balance the flavors. You know, as a winemaker, you want to have the wine that competes with the flavors of the dishes.
Okay.
If you're a chef, then you'd want to tone down the wine and have your star be your dish.
Okay, so this is not in my notes here to ask you, but when you mentioned chef, it brought something up. So my wife loves these cooking shows, and a lot of times we'll see people, they'll be pouring wine into a dish. What is that all about? Or is that part of the pairing process? Or
yes, that can be part of the pairing process. And one of the rules that I was taught early on is you only cook with wines that you really, really like. Because as you cook with it, it gets reduced, you intensify the flavors. So you don't want to cook with something that you don't really like, because that will intensify what you don't like about it.
Oh, okay. So if you enjoy that wine, then that's something to help bring out the...
Right. And then you want to match the flavors of the dish with the flavors of the wine.
Awesome. Why would you use a steel barrel versus an oak barrel?
Well, it depends on the wines you're trying to make. Like Riesling, that you want it to be fruity and have the Riesling grape character, then you want to keep that pure, so you go to a stainless steel tank. Where reds or dry Chardonnays, since they're dry, they can be really rough wine. We age them 6 months to a year in the oak barrel to help soften up the edges, impart like a toasted almond character to the wine.
So whenever I drink wine, I kind of like that more of that earthy kind of round. So those are mostly oak.
Those are mostly oak.
And sometimes when I drink wine from a still barrel, I sometimes get that little headache kind of feeling afterwards. Is that because of the processing, or is that just me?
Wouldn't think you'd get a headache. I mean, obviously stainless steel is going to be more tart, like Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling are going to be stainless steel wines.
Okay, so you were just mentioning the names of the wines. Is that coming from the grapes, or how does that process work?
Well, those are grape varieties, and then the wines made from those grape varieties, that's the name of the wine.
Okay. Now, I've visited a few wineries, and I've talked to a few folks, and they say, you know, I get my barrels made from this sort of wood, or I get my other barrels made from this sort of steel. Talk to us a little bit about that process.
Well, the oak barrels, they use white oak, because white oak is a closed grain, so it splits easy and it doesn't leak. And then you can buy barrels that the oak is grown in Virginia, Missouri, Minnesota, France, France, and Yugoslavia. And they all impart different flavors because of the environment that they're grown in.
So does some of that oak then mix with the wine to make a chemical reaction?
Yeah, it actually flavors the wine. And if you have slower growing environment, you have tighter grains of wood, and that imposes a more mellow flavor. Where if you have faster growing environments that you have bigger grains, then you have more oak flavor.
So when you're selecting what type of wines you want to make, you also have to put that process of what first steel versus oak, and then the type of oak that you want to go through as well.
You go from, if you have this idea of the wine you want, you start off with, when should I pick it? Based on the sugar content, the acidity, and then what yeast I should use when I ferment it, and then what temperature that I need to get for those characteristics. And then it's like, do I want stainless steel or oak barrels? If I want oak barrels, what type of oak? How long it's in oak?
Wow, so you almost need a PhD.
Well, people call it a recipe, but it's not really like a recipe. It's just taking a style and implementing your style that you want that wine from the day the grapes come in the door. And every year is different, so your path to that endpoint might be a little different from year to year.
So you have to think through this process when you're thinking of what wine am I going to make?
Right. Yeah.
You have to go through this whole, we'll use the word recipe, if you will, to decide what you want at the end.
Yeah, and then like even of how you're going to filter it, and what like closures you're going to use in the bottle. So I mean, you have to think the whole thing through before you even bring the first grape in the door.
Wow, that's a lot. So we're going to take a break here, and we're going to come back and talk some more wine with Lee and the rest of the folks from the Virginia Wine Festival.